Hi, this is a recording to help those of you who prefer to hear directions in an auditory manner rather than just reading everything you need to do. This is designed to help you keep the two main assignments in EDPS 667 straight. I've been doing this long enough that I know sometimes people have trouble being sure what am I supposed to do for one assignment versus the other. So let's go over that. Let's see if we can make this turn. There we go. There are two major projects in this course, the review of research and the mini research project and PowerPoint, which is typically shorthanded as the PowerPoint. We're going to go over these one at a time. We're going to start with the review of research. What is it? It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a review that investigates a research-based question. Notice it says it investigates a question, and we'll talk more about that in the course. But this is not a topic. You're not going to write about reading, per se. You might look at the relationship between self-efficacy and reading achievement in elementary school students. As you can tell, the kinds of questions that you can answer in a review of research have to be data-based. They have to be questions that someone can answer by doing research. Otherwise, it doesn't work. In this assignment, you'll be analyzing research that's done by other people. You'll be reading primary sources and demonstrating your ability to read research studies, make sense of them, and synthesize them. It will typically entail a bit more detail than the review of literature that you might see in a published study, for example, because in a published study, the author is providing background information but isn't particularly needing to demonstrate his or her ability to read a research study, which is actually what you're doing in this assignment. So, the review of research will report information from primary research studies and will summarize, analyze, and compare and critique the studies. This is not an annotated bibliography. Sometimes people will think, oh, I'll describe study number 1, then study number 2, then study number 3 in kind of a list. That isn't the intent here. The intent is to read the studies and then look at them as a whole and say, okay, now that I'm a little bit of an expert on this, now that I've read a group of studies, what can I say? Are there some studies that are stronger than others? Does the balance of information tend to answer the question in a certain way? Or are the results so confusing or so minimal that there really isn't a strong conclusion to be drawn? And that would be okay if that's actually what the research says. One mistake that people sometimes make is they hand in a paper that's more like a persuasive paper, where they are saying, here is what the best thing to do is here, or here's why this or that is important. That's not this assignment. That's a good thing to be able to do for other assignments, but not this one. In this case, your opinion is really not very important. You will show your opinion at the beginning when you're talking about why this is important, of course, with some data to back you up. And you certainly have a place for your point of view in the discussion section. But for the most part, this is a just the facts kind of paper. When I was a young girl, there used to be a TV show where Joe Friday was the investigator, and whenever someone he was interviewing would start going off and telling stories, he would always say, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. That's kind of what we're doing here. What are the facts, so to say, or at least what are the data that are available to us? So, how's that different from a review of literature? Say a review of literature you might one day be doing in a culminating experience or a thesis. The review of research is a bit more restrictive in the kinds of sources you're allowed. You may not use secondary sources in which authors summarize somebody else's research. Now, those sources may be useful to you in the course of doing your review of research because you can use them to locate literature. A very smart thing to do is to read somebody's secondary source and say, okay, let me go find the primary research on which this is based. But except for the introduction, you really don't have a place to use secondary sources in this paper. And it's best not to use them at all, just to not get confused about the thing. It's very simplistic, and again, we'll talk more about it all semester, but if the article you're reading doesn't have a section clearly labeled methods and a section clearly labeled conclusions, chances are it's not a primary research study, so don't use it. All right. So basically, in your review of research, you're going to investigate a question by reading and analyzing research studies. You're going to read the research and decide if it's credible. You may find that, say, 6 studies say one thing and 3 studies say something else, but you know those 3 studies were the bigger ones and the ones that were better designed, so maybe the balance of evidence should go that way. That's the kind of judgment you might be thinking about. And then, at the end, you'll make recommendations for research and practice. And there are a lot more detailed directions in the course. So, and here's the key to this particular presentation. How is that different from the PowerPoint assignment? In the review of research, you are reading other people's research and making sense of it. In the mini research project, the PowerPoint, you become the researcher. You are the one who's gathering data and drawing conclusions. So, in the mini research PowerPoint, you are going to actually identify a research question, probably a really small one. Read a very small number of articles on the subject because you're already demonstrating your ability to read articles in the other assignment. The key here is to plan a research method that will answer your question. Gather the data, analyze the data, draw conclusions, and make recommendations. Now, some of you are probably going, "What? I don't know how to do that. I'm not a researcher. I don't know how to do statistics." Not to worry. Notice the mini in the mini research PowerPoint. This is a small study that most people do in their classrooms, with their colleagues, with people they know. The intent here is to make sure we understand the difference between conducting research and reading somebody else's research. But what could you research? Think about things in your classroom. Are you curious to know if you changed, say, the arrangement of the materials in your math center? Would that make a difference? Think about things you've wondered about and observed. Maybe you've noticed the way students are clustered in the cafeteria or on the playground or in the student center. Or you could think about some problems you'd like to try to solve. Take a look at the sample projects in Course Home, but think small. This is not intended to be your thesis, although it could be a pilot for your thesis. It's not intended to be your life's work. It's a miniature opportunity to find out what's going on in the world around you. I've had people who've done everything from trying to examine how the library displays impact student book checking out, to changing the learning centers in a classroom, to investigating the seating patterns of EMU students in the student union. We've had many surveys of colleagues. We've had people who investigated candy consumption at a city Halloween party. And in one memorable project, I even had people, and this was in a summer course where their time was very compressed, examine hand washing versus not hand washing in public restrooms in the mall. That was an interesting and kind of appalling project, actually, when you found the data. You can use observations in a library, on the playground, in the student center, in your classroom. You could use surveys or interviews. You could just change your regular educational practice. Maybe change the way your students practice their spelling words and see if it helps. And occasionally we have people who do additional analyses of databases, generally things that are part of their existing work responsibilities. And with permission of your boss, that can be possible. If you want to do that, you should talk to me about it to make sure we don't violate any kind of privacy laws. We've got a little summary here. The review of research versus the PowerPoint, which I think I will just leave here for you to look at rather than have me read it to you, because you're in graduate school, you can read. And it drives me crazy when people do that. So one more time. In the review of research, you read, analyze, and critique research. In the mini research PowerPoint, you actually do the research. Probably not with bubbling test tubes like this one. It's going to be an adventure. But I will tell you, I've taught this class many, many times, and I've had many, many students be very successful and do lots of interesting things. It's a good opportunity to study something you care about. The course is a lot of work. We all know that. It's a research course. That's the nature of the beast. So study something that interests you, and all the work you put into it will be really worthwhile. I look forward to the semester with you.